Welcome back to the Top Notch Documentaries YouTube channel. The sudden disappearances of 10-year-olds Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells and the unfolding of events which resulted in the announcement of a killer within a quiet rural community shocked the UK. When everything came to light, it was revealed that the murderer's name was Ian Huntley, his name synonymous with pain and despair to any UK viewer aware of true crime cases. The murders of these two young girls astounded the village of Soham in Cambridgeshire, where they vanished from on the 4th of August 2002. Two young children were taken by this dangerous predator, his past history clearly stressing the danger that he posed to young girls. On this episode of Cases from the Past, I cover this disturbing case. I hope you enjoy. Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells were both just 10 years old when they vanished whilst walking to their local sweet shop in Soham, Cambridgeshire. Soham is where both Jessica and Holly lived, and up until this point, the crime rate in the town was very low, near enough non-existent, and the community was typical for a town in the UK. Unfortunately, this case tarnished the peaceful community, creating a black cloud which still exists to this very day. Somewhere between their homes and the sweet shop, the girls went missing. The walk is short, and so police had a rough idea about where they could have been. The last person who had seen the girls at about 6:15 PM was a local man by the name of Ian Huntley. He was interested in helping out the investigators and had appeared on a news broadcast, being interviewed live about seeing the girls, and he ended up giving an account of what had transpired.
How do we know they were here at 6:15? Well, we have an eyewitness. Ian Huntley here is a familiar figure. Evening, Ian. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
Well, I don't know the girls. I stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good, as she hadn't got the job. And they just said, please tell her that we're very sorry. And off they walked in the direction of the library over there.
Ian Huntley would quickly become a prime suspect based on him being the last person claiming to have talked to the girls before they fell off the face of the earth. The missing persons cases quickly attracted the interest of the media, and a huge search would be conducted on the same day that the girls went missing. The search turned up nothing, and it wasn't until 13 days later, on the 17th of August 2002, that the girls' bodies were found dumped in the neighbouring county of Suffolk. The dump site was close to Ian Huntley's father's house. Earlier that same day, Ian Huntley and his partner Maxine Carr had both been arrested. The girls' clothing that they had worn on the day of their disappearances had been found charred, burned in Soham College, where Huntley was employed at the time. It would later emerge that Huntley had lured the girls into his house. He had done this in part through his association with Maxine Carr, who he told the girls was inside the house. The girls trusted Maxine Carr, and although she was out of town when everything occurred, she was well aware of Huntley's intent and murder and his perverted interest in young girls. What went down in the house isn't clear, but it's suspected that Huntley quickly took control of the girls and murdered them via strangulation. An autopsy of both of the girls' bodies suggested this grim fate, but given the summer heat and other factors, rapid body decomposition had taken place. Therefore, whether any sexual assault had taken place or whether it had been part of the killer's motivations wasn't able to be confirmed. A jealous rage motivation was put forth because right before the suspected abduction time, Huntley had had an argument with Carr. He suspected her of cheating. Given his history relating to sex with children, I'd say that a sexual motivation is very likely in this case, and it sounds like a combination of Huntley feeling anger from the phone call and then a wrong place at the wrong time scenario for the two young girls, which culminated in the unforeseen events which occurred. I'll now get into some of Huntley's background. Ian Huntley was born in the Lincolnshire town of Grimsby in 1974. Throughout his childhood he was bullied, and this resulted in him having to move schools because of the bullying. As he grew older, he chose to avoid taking his A-levels and instead picked employment. It was around this time that Huntley began eyeing young girls, all underage, and this interest resulted in him dating a 13-year-old when he was 18. Evidently, Huntley wasn't a normal teenager, and it wouldn't be long before he married an 18-year-old, and after just a few weeks ended up marrying her. The marriage fell through in no time, and Huntley began travelling around, constantly changing jobs and living situation. In 1998, Huntley had a child with a 15-year-old and he was 24 at the time. A police investigation into Huntley's history would show that Huntley had sexual contact with at least 11 children from ages 11 to 17 between the mid-1990s to early 2000s. Huntley eventually received criminal charges following a burglary and separate R-word charge. Both cases had a lack of solid evidence though, and so neither resulted in any conviction. If it had have resulted in a conviction, then Huntley likely wouldn't have been employed as a caretaker at a school. It was in Grimsby that Huntley met Maxine Carr and the pair had a toxic relationship. On one occasion, a man saw Huntley beating her outside their flat. The man intervened but ended up regretting doing so. As it turned out, both Huntley and Carr were very similar. Both were toxic people who could present a good image when they needed to. They were adept at lying, and this became perfectly clear much later on. It was likely this ability to present a good image that resulted in both of them managing to find work in Soham. They moved there in 2001, and whilst Huntley worked as a caretaker at the college opposite his home, Carr was a primary school teaching assistant. Whether a background check on Huntley had been conducted as he was working near to children sounds unlikely. This case has been seen by many as a failure by both vetting companies and the police, and it's easy to see why given the tragic specifics. Now let's get back to the story. Huntley and Carr were now locked up on charges relating to the two girls' murders, and Huntley's trial began in November 2003. The prosecution had evidence on Huntley, including fibres and hair, which had been recovered from the crime scene. Huntley trying to burn the girls' clothing hadn't been much of a success, and a forensic team had managed to obtain these crucial bits of evidence. Along with this, traces of chalk and other materials in his car helped to link Huntley to the crime scene. Meanwhile, Maxine Carr was facing charges pertaining to obstructing the course of justice and assisting Huntley. She knew that he was a danger to society and had given a false alibi for him in an attempt to help him get away with the murders. Huntley would alter his original narrative that he'd given to the news team on his televised interview. He now claimed that he was responsible for the deaths of the girls and that the girls had died in his home, but that everything had been accidental. This claim would be juxtaposed much later by Huntley, mentioning to his father that he'd killed one of the girls as she attempted to phone for help. The accidental death story given by Huntley was described as rubbish. Nobody believed his extensive lies, and he'd be given a 40-year sentence for the two girls' murders. Maxine Carr managed to manoeuvre around the public outcry and got a 3.5-year sentence. In May 2004, she was actually freed following a 16-month remand sentence. The system is clearly broken because this woman was handed out a fresh identity and now lives somewhere in the UK. Her knowledge of the Soham murders making her just as much responsible for the crime in my opinion. In 2005, Ian Huntley would be attacked by another murderer who had already murdered 4 people. Boiling water was chucked over him and he was injured in the incident. Many would see this as a good thing, and little sympathy is shown to child killers in prison after all. Huntley now resides in prison, surrounded by other murderers, terrorists and some of the other country's worst offenders. His home was destroyed in 2004, and it's easy to see why, given the constant reminder that it brought to victim families and the community in general. The community has tried to put this case behind them, however the town will always be associated with the brutal murders of Jessica and Holly. This has been another episode of Cases from the Past. As always, thank you for watching.